You know how sometimes a little adventure can take a turn for the worse? One second you are having fun and everything is going great, and then the next all of a sudden you are dying? Well, the group of guys in today's story experienced just that, except it was even worse because they were inside a very deep and dark underground cave system. They were all being drowned in this cave and they had nowhere to escape. You know, it's one of those stories that make you realize just how unpredictable and brutal nature can be. In 1967, 10 explorers decided to dwell into Mossdale Cave system. These caves weren't your typical walk-in-the-park kind of caves. They were tight, cramped, and definitely not meant for casual tourists. In other words, if you don't know what you're doing inside this cave, you would easily find yourself in a lot of trouble. The leaders of this group, Dave Adamson and his buddy Jeff Burrow, were experienced cavers. They had been in and out of Mosdale plenty of times and knew the place like the back of their hands. So they never even thought that something hazardous would ever happen to them while they're inside the cave. The day started with a lot of excitement. Dave and Jeff, along with their friends Colin Vickers, John Adgan, Bill Frakes, and the youngest member 17-year-old Michael Ryan, were ready for a full day of exploring and mapping out the caves. It was a grueling trek through wet, muddy passages where you had to crawl and squeeze through spaces barely big enough to fit a person. After a few hours, 4 of the original group, 2 men and 2 women, including Dave's fiancée Morag Forbes, decided to head back. They had had enough adventure for one day. They exited the cave around 5 p.m. and although the sky was overcast, it didn't seem too threatening. But for Dave, Jeff and the others, the real challenge was just beginning. They ventured even deeper into the cave, crawling through a passage called Far Marathon. Guys, picture this. It's a 900-foot long tunnel deep inside the cave, only 18 inches high and 12 inches wide. Just big enough to drag yourself through on your belly with water trickling along the bottom. Once you are in, turning back is not really an option. No matter what happens, the only direction you can move towards is forward. Morag meanwhile came back to the cave entrance to check on the guys, but didn't see any sign of them. It had started to rain a bit but nothing too serious, so she thought well they will be back pretty soon, so she left. Underground though, the water levels were beginning to rise and the streams the guys were navigating were getting stronger. They noticed that but they didn't really think much of that, they just thought it's not really a threat yet, so they kept going. They figured they could finish their mapping and get out before it got too bad. As the water kept rising, they decided it was time to call it a day and head back. Dave, who knew these caves inside out, led the way. They were 3 hours from the entrance, but they trusted him to get them out safely. Unfortunately though, the rain outside was turning into a deluge, flooding the cave system faster than they could have ever imagined. Morag returned to the entrance one last time at 9 p.m. and her heart sank. What had been a manageable rain earlier had turned into a full-blown flood. The entrance to the cave was now completely submerged under a lake of water. In a panic, she sprinted to get help. Deep inside the cave, the men were now in a race against time. The water was racing fast and they were crawling through that narrow, claustrophobic passage with water rushing towards them. Jeff and Michael were the first to tackle the return through Far Marathon. The water was up to their shoulders and they had to press their faces into the smallest cracks in the rock to breathe. Behind them, Dave and the others were fighting their way through. The passage was so tight that they could barely move, let alone turn around. The water was relentless and they were trapped in an underground river with nowhere to go. John Adgan, the last in line, heard the desperate cries of his friends and realized that he had to retreat. All of his friends were basically dying in front of him. He found a small crack overhead and wedged himself in, hoping to find the last breath of air. Outside, Morag had found help. The rescue efforts were in full swing. Volunteers worked tirelessly to dam off the entrance and pump out the water, trying to clear a path for the men to escape. As the hours passed, the rescue teams were working even harder, hoping against all hope that some miracle might still save them. They all already kinda knew that they probably must be dead by this point because they knew the cave was fully filled with water and they would have nowhere to escape. but the community came together, with more volunteers arriving, driven by the slim chance of finding someone alive somewhere. They built makeshift dams and brought in more powerful pumps, doing everything humanly possible to lower the water level. Families and friends of the trapped men gathered near the entrance, their faces itched with worry and despair. They clung to each other, offering comfort and support, but they were losing hope with each passing minute. Morag was there too, her heart breaking with every moment that passed without news. She had planned to marry Dave in less than a month, and now she was staring into the abyss, fearing the worst. The hours turned into days, and the chances of finding anyone alive grew slimmer, but the rescuers pressed on. On the third day, the water levels finally began to recede, revealing the grim aftermath of the flood. As the rescuers made their way deeper into the cave, the sight that greeted them was heartbreaking. They were met with a scene of unimaginable devastation. The once navigable passages were now choked with debris, and the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and despair. They found Jeff and Michael's bodies, their upper halves wedged into a ridge, trying to reach the last pockets of air. One by one they found the others. All 6 men have drowned in that inescapable flood. John Edgion's body was the hardest to find. He had wedged himself so tightly into a crack that it took 2 days to locate his remains. But all in all, in the end, the cave had claimed all of the 6 cavers. The community mourned their loss, and the cave was sealed, becoming their final resting place. In 1970, the friends of the cavers returned to move their bodies to an upper chamber, now known as the sanctuary. It stands as the solemn reminder of the risks they took and the price they paid. So next time you think about venturing into the unknown, remember the story of the Mossdale Caves. It's a stark reminder that sometimes nature doesn't play by the rules. A small miscalculation can lead to unimaginable consequences. Anyway guys, that brings us to the end of this story. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and even learned something from the story. I will be back with another story just like this, and until then, stay safe out there and goodbye.